The whispering shadows. Living alone in a remote cabin deep in the woods had always been my dream. I craved solitude and the peace that came with being surrounded by nature. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the only sounds I heard were the sounds of rustling leaves and the occasional call of a distant animal. It was perfect, or so I thought. One cold winter night, I was curled up by the fireplace, reading a book. The wind howled outside, making the trees sway and creak ominously. I had grown used to the sounds of the forest, but tonight something felt off. There was an underlying tension in the air, a sense of being watched. I shook off the unease and tried to focus on my book, but the feeling persisted. The flames in the fireplace flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Every now and then, I thought I saw a figure out of the corner of my eye, only to find nothing there when I turned to look. Hours passed, and the sense of dread grew stronger. I decided to call it a night and head to bed, hoping sleep would come quickly and banish the irrational fear. As I was closing the curtains in my bedroom, I caught a glimpse of something moving outside. It was just a fleeting shadow, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. I stood there, staring into the darkness, trying to convince myself it was just an animal. But then I saw it again. This time, it was unmistakable. A tall, gaunt figure was standing at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the pale moonlight. Its eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light, and it was staring right at me. My heart pounded in my chest as I yanked the curtain shut and backed away from the window. I grabbed my phone, but of course there was no signal this far out. I had a landline for emergencies, but my hands were shaking too much to dial the number. I decided to wait it out, hoping the figure would go away. I tried to calm myself down, reminding myself it could be a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the swaying trees. I could even just be hallucinating. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. I had seen it, and it had seen me. The hours dragged on, and I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint noises outside, like footsteps crunching on the snow, and the occasional low, guttural growl. The figure was out there, and it was getting closer. Just before dawn, I heard a soft tapping at the window. My blood ran cold as I realized it was coming from my bedroom window, the same one where I had seen the figure. I lay there paralyzed with fear, listening to the rhythmic tapping. It was too deliberate to be a tree branch or an animal. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. I mustered the courage to peek out from under the covers and saw the silhouette of a hand pressed against the glass. It was long and bony with fingers that seemed to be way too thin to be human. The tapping continued, now accompanied by a soft, whispering voice. It was calling my name. I bolted out of bed and ran to the living room, grabbing the shotgun I kept for protection. I checked the door and windows, making sure they were all locked. The tapping stopped, but the whispering continued, growing louder and more insistent. I sat on the couch, clutching the shotgun, and waited for the sun to rise. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, the whispering faded away, and the sense of dread began to lift. I cautiously opened the curtains and looked outside. There was no sign of the figure, no footprints in the snow. It was as if it had never been there. But I knew better. It was still out there, watching and waiting. Over the next few days, I tried to go about my usual routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I ventured outside, I felt eyes on me, and I would catch glimpses of shadows darting between the trees. At night, the tapping and whispering would return, growing more persistent and desperate. I barely slept, and my nerves are frayed. I considered leaving the cabin, but the thought of driving through the dark, snow-covered roads terrified me even more. I felt trapped, with no way out. One night, the whispering took on a new tone. It was no longer calling my name, but speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The words were guttural and harsh, filled with malice. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and the windows began to rattle as if something was trying to force its way in. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed a bag and decided to make a run for it at first light. As I waited for dawn, I heard a new sound, a low, rhythmic chanting that seemed to be coming from all around the cabin. The shadows outside grew darker, coalescing into a single, towering figure. It looked like what I can only describe as a skinwalker. I had heard stories about them, but I never believed they were real. Now, I knew the truth. It had found me, and it wouldn't stop until it had me. The chanting grew louder, and the walls of the cabin began to shake. I knew I had to leave now, or it would be too late. I grabbed my bag and the shotgun, and without looking back, I burst out the door and ran for my truck. The forest seemed alive with movement. Shadows darting between the trees, whispering my name. I fumbled with the keys, my hand shaking uncontrollably. But I managed to start the truck and peel out of there. As I drove down the winding, snow-covered road, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching me go. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and I know it will never stop hunting me. I drove straight to the nearest town and checked into a motel. I haven't been back to the cabin since, and I never will. The nightmares still haunt me, and I can still hear the whispering sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls and the shadows seem to move on their own. I don't know how long I can keep running. I've almost drained my savings, but I'm too scared to stop anywhere long enough to work, because I know the skinwalker is still out there, and it will never stop until it has me. Living alone in a remote cabin may have been my dream, but it quickly became my nightmare. If you ever find yourself alone in the woods and you hear your name whispered in the wind, don't question it and don't look back. Just run. Thank you for joining me for another 10-minute Tales. I hope you enjoyed my creepypasta type story. If you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments down below. The story will also be posted over on my subreddit, r/NightmareKrys. Link is in the description down below as well. As always, please like and subscribe. New videos will be posted every Friday. And thanks so much for joining. See you next time.